Hello everyone and welcome to the channel Funk with JavaScript. So I think I have figured out JavaScript objects in details, and in this series we will be discussing about them. And we will take an example application which is COVID tracker. So we will track on each places slash countries how many vaccinations have been given and so on and so forth, and then see how the objects can be created in JavaScript. But before we go further, I have a joke which I think only I find funny. The joke is that I am very surprised that I can work from home for a year just because somebody somewhere ate a pangolin. I can't draw the connection between them. It's funny to me, but I think I'm the only guy. So if you find it funny, please do let me know in the comments. Let's get started. So, uh, to So for the purpose of this session, I have created a base project which we will take up and then we will start writing code in it. That is the repository. You can always see all the branches over here. So what are the branches? Each session has been divided into sub projects, and all the source code for that project is in the branch. So for example, when we are discussing about constructor function and somehow if the code is not working at your end, fret no more. You can just clone this branch on your laptop, npm I, say npm start, and there you will be able to see whatever we discuss in this project. So without wasting a time, let's get started. I will first of all, the first thing I will do is to clone the project. And the link to this repository is in my YouTube description. Feel free to check it out. So let's copy it. I would like to keep it under E. Let's go to code. I would like to copy CMD. Let's see. So let's go to E drive. CD code. And then I would say git clone and then the URL. For those who are new, Git is a version repository for the source code. You would have to install Git software for this to work. I would put the link in the description below. Once it is done, it will download that project, the base project for me. Let's close it. I don't need it. That's the code. Fair enough. Copy. Let's go ahead. Let's open code. Fair enough. Let's go ahead. I don't need to do this. File. Open the folder. The object's this. And that's the source code. What you would need to do is to come over here at the bottom and then select master branch, origin with master. You should see the whole source code downloaded over there. Let's go ahead and do an npm I. This process is going to take a bit of time, so I will cut the video over here and I'll see you in the next series. But before I do that, don't forget to hit npm install. So I hope the npm install ran fine. So just to check if everything went all right, I would say npm start, and it should pick up. It should give us a nice looking website. Development is starting. Let's open it on Chrome. So I would say localhost 3000, press enter, and if everything went fine, I should see a site like this. Nothing major about it. You have the country, Belgium, United States, India, and then how many million doses have been given, how many people have been vaccinated, and what is the percentage vaccination in terms of the complete population. So of course, to do this, we need some kind of an object behind the scene, and we will be creating objects in 4 different ways. Why 4, you ask? Because in JavaScript, there are 4 different ways of how you can create an object. So these are, wait a minute, I will go to the documentation. So there are 4 ways of how you can create an object. One is object literal, and second is the constructor functions. These 2 we will see in the demo today. And object create and classes would be in another session. Object literal is the most easiest. You just define the structure of your object as a string, if I could say, as a key value pair for a lack of a better word, and that's your object. Constructor function are actually the template functions, just like constructors we had in good old classes. So you put some parameters in, it will define it, and then return you the created object. Object create is the base method. Behind the scenes, constructor functions and object literals are using object create to create your functions. And then the last is the classes. These are new addition to ES6. Um, my personal sense is that this is implemented so that the people of procedural languages find it a bit easier to enter JavaScript world. They are fantastic. Please go ahead and use them if you want. But I must say not everyone is on board so far as classes are concerned, because one of the criticism is that they really hide what is happening behind the scenes. There are syntactical sugar basically on constructor functions. So if you have to learn it, I would still recommend getting up to speed with constructor functions before you migrate to classes and using them fully. So without wasting much time, let's go ahead. So that's our website. Let me put it over here, and we would look at the source code. The first file we would see is app.js. So as you can see, there is nothing much happening. I am printing some console message. Let's remove this for a while because we will be doing it later on. What else do we have? We have this text. So that is our COVID vaccination tracker. And then I have a table, country, doses vaccinated. And this is coming over here. And then individual data for countries, Belgium, United States, that kind of thing. But of course, it's but obvious that in any kind of a real life scenario, we are not going to hard code all these values over here. Ideally, they should be converted into an object and preferably coming from some web services. We will be doing that in a minute. The second thing we need to check is our app.cs file. This is where the CSS is coming from. Nothing major about it. And then, of course, the index.js file, as we already discussed in our previous video, that this is the base file which React loads onto the document. It's because of this app. React goes ahead whenever we start the project, it goes looking for app is there, and then it picks up all the text over here. So without wasting any time, let's go ahead and start creating our objects. The first thing I would do is to create a folder. Let's call it objects. A folder, let's call them objects, and then create a new file. We would name the file, let me quickly check my notes. It should be object literal. So let's call it object literal because, as I mentioned, there are 4 different ways to create it. That's the first one. Let's go ahead and simply create an object. Let's call it Belgium. Over here, I can say name. It should be all with caps. Belgium. Then we have doses given, which should be, let's call it 1.74 million. JS module, and then we can import it in our app.js like this. Import countries from objects, and then we go about object literals. Why would you do so if you would ask me? The primary reason is code separation. If your code is 10,000 lines or maybe 1,000,000 lines, you don't want everything to be in your one big fat file. It's unmaintainable. So you break the chunk code into different files, and of course based on functionality most of the times. And also you would have certain variables within your functions which you don't want to export to external files. That's the way to do it. If you think about it, imports are nothing but it's similar to using statements in C#, which we were used to. The first thing I do whenever I import something from other module is to print it just to know if everything went all right or not. So let's go ahead and do this. If I do console.log, I would save it. Now, if I do my F12, I should be able to see an array over here. Cool. So the information is over there. I can see this an array, Belgium, US, and India. Now, the next thing I need to do is to replace these hard-coded values over here with the actual values. The way to do that is to take out individual entries from this array, and I would do const, let's call it Belgium, USA, and India. And then let's put it countries. So this is called destructuring. So what it is going to do is to put each of the entries of countries into Belgium, US, and India. So 3 entries into 3 variables. And the way to use them would be with, I put a bracket and then say Belgium dot name. Similarly, I would say here, let me put all the brackets immediately. So this would be Belgium dot doses given, and this would be sorry, do. I need to type it here. It's difficult to type and see. And over here, since it's a percentage, so we need to do some mathematical operation. For the timing, I would keep it as minus. We will be calculating the percentage when we go to the constructor functions. Let's go ahead, put it like this. Over here, it should be USA. Oops. And this again should be for India. Similarly, let's call in help from the greatest programmer ever, which is copy paste, and then we put it India here. Let's save it, and if everything goes all right, we should see all the data reflected over here. Remember, we changed the data, so let's go here. I would do a Control S. Oops, no, I don't want to save it. I want to see Control S, and now let's open Chrome again, and the data has changed. Cool. Great. So our data now is coming from an objects rather than hard-coded. And of course, over here, we can always make a call to some API or our database at the back end and get the data fresh from the servers. We will see that in later courses. So that's how you create an object. But it doesn't mean that you only have to create only one level. It can be nested. So for example, I could have also said capital, right? And then I could have said name is Belgium's capital, I think is Brussels. Oh, I know because I live there. And then in Brussels, dose is given is XYZ and so forth. So you can do a lot of things over here. I mean, it's a nested object at the end of the day. And then you can refer to it as like Belgium dot capital dot name. Pretty good. Very fast way to create objects, as we can see. And I can love it. When would I use it? If I have to create an object only once, I know what the structure is. That's the way I go with it. Then I don't really need constructor functions because that's really if you want to generate the objects again and again. Other thing I would like to share with you is something called a spread operator. Because imagine over I cannot have only 3 entries over here, right? What I could do in that case is say, hey, I really don't care about rest of the entries. Just give me the first. Let's call it Belgium 2, and then put everything else in rest. Now, what it is going to do is to put the first entry in this variable, which is Belgium 2, and the rest, this thing will become an array. So before going further, let's closely see what it does. What does it print? So I will do console.log. Let's call Belgium 2, and then immediately we say rest. if I save it, let's open Chrome. And as you can see over here, let me make it a bit bigger. We have the country, the first object which we took out from the array, and then the rest is a two array of length 2, the rest of the entries over there. As you already saw, it's not necessary to name it Belgium. It doesn't mean that I'm exporting a variable of the type Belgium from my object literal, so I have to use objects. That's not the case. You can put it anything as we saw it over here. Similarly, the rest can be anything. I could have named it rest of entries and it will still work. The important thing, of course, is this, which is 3 dots, and it is called spread operator. Very important, not only for arrays, we can use it for objects, we can use it for lots of other type of entities. But for the time being, let's close it like this. And we have our code running. One fundamental problem over here still is that, okay, it's only 3 entries. So, hey, Akshay, you just went ahead and you hard coded the 3 objects sort of over here. If there was a million, there's no way I could have created all the million object over here and then exported each one of them. That would be disastrous. I mean, it's too much work to write all of that. So what we need is some kind of a template, some kind of a base function wherein I can pick up these values and export them, right? So let's go ahead and create a new class, I'm still using the word class, because it's a hangover from procedural languages. So let's go ahead and create a constructor function. So the way to do that is to say new file, let's call it constfn.js. Now over here, I will define a function, which is, let's call it places. It's a function. It would take in as the parameter would be name, second would be doses given, vaccinated, and population. Voila, looks fine. Then I would say this dot name is name. This dot doses given is doses. Doses given. This dot vaccinated is vaccinated, and this dot population is population. Great. And now I can say const Belgium is new places, and then whatever data I want to enter. So let's call it Belgium. So this would be, I don't know, let's put some number over there. Doesn't matter. And then it will be for USA. This would be for India. Let's call it USA, and let's call it India. Increase the population here, increase the population here, make one number, just change some numbers randomly, because I think that's what our governments are doing at this time. They're just randomly doing shit. I don't think anyone has figured out what they're doing so far as COVID is concerned, except for China. Whew. So let's call it export default. Nothing major over here. If I save it as I have, I should see some values changed. I don't think anything changed. Why is that? So if I change one number here, oops, one number over here, it should refresh, right? Nothing. It's because, I know, it's because we have defined our objects. Okay, it's a new file, but we have not imported it. How silly. Let's go ahead. So rather than countries, I will import it from the other function, which is the constructor function. If I save it now, it should change the value. Oh no, I get array. Boo, 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 boo. What's the error? La, 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 la. Let's check the error. It says cannot name property of name undefined. Somewhere I have not exported it correctly, I think. Ah, it's not a dot, it should be a comma. So if I save it now, let's open Chrome, and there it is. Let's refresh it. Yeah, that's my data. Still my percentage is minus and I would like to change it. The way to do that is to write a function, as I said. So we need to pick up all the population and all the vaccinated, divide vaccinated by population, multiply by 100, and yada, 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 we know. The way to do that is to write a function without a function. Yeah, you heard me right. A function without a function. The first time I saw this syntax, I couldn't figure out. My mind exploded because to me it was a harakiri. How can you, it's blasphemy. How can you write a function without a function? If functions or object was enough for me to comprehend, but then you have functions without functions. The answer to that is that this JavaScript has a very strong tradition of functional programming behind the scenes. It's a very different paradigm of thinking about how you are writing software. So in short, when you write functioning programming, when you're writing functional programming, you're not thinking about objects as such. You are thinking more about the abstraction, about the common functionalities, and those are the objects for you. That's how I can explain it in layman's term. But we will see that in subsequent series how functional programming has really brought the flavor to JavaScript. It's just very powerful and very different way of thinking, and it's very exciting. So let's write a function without a function. No, within a function, sorry. The way to do that would be to say this dot percentage. It's again a function, right? And in this, I would like to return. Remember, a function has to return a value. So I would say this dot vaccinated divided by this dot population, and then you multiply by 100. So let's do it this way. Multiply it with 100. Let's save it, and now I can go ahead and use this parameter, this function name, in my, and replace it with minus. Replace minus with it. So if I go to Belgium dot percentage, let's copy this thing, paste it here, and paste it here. Now if I save it, I should be able to see my percentages calculated. Again, no, because I have error, and that is because, let me show it to you. I'm using function. It's a function. Remember, I cannot use it as a property name. So I have to do this and this and this. Let's save it. Now if I go to my, one more thing, I forgot about it. I'm using the same variables. Boo, 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 boo. How many mistakes can one person make in one demo? Apparently 3 is the answer. So let's save it. And now if I go to my screen, I have all my percentages calculated. But there's still a problem. I don't really want these big numbers. I would like to truncate to 2 decimal points. The way to do that is to use the toFixed function. It's an inbuilt JavaScript function which operates on number and remove and truncates all the decimal points to 2. It can two or more, sorry. Oh, come on. And then say to fixed, and I would like it to be 2. Let's save it. And now if I look at my screen, I have 2 decimal places. Great. Couple of points over here. Let's have a look at the source code again and try to figure out a couple of things. The first is, remember, see, I have defined the variable function with places with capital P. Now, that's not necessary. It's a convention. All the constructor function name or classes / components in JavaScript, it's better to start with P. It's a convention, as I said. But the individual variables, they have to be camel cased. So it is Belgium. If I had to say Belgium, if my variable name was Belgium population, so I will say Belgium population, camel case again, right? The other thing is sort of a quiz. As I said, every function should return a value, but we actually are not returning anything over here. The percentage is the function is returning a value, so that's okay. But what about this? What about this function? It's not returning anything. So any idea? Okay. Before we do that, let me explain to you in a bit of detail what the new keyword is doing behind the scenes so far as constructor functions are concerned, right? The first thing it does, it assigns an empty object to the variable. What does that mean? Let's see. If I go to my source code over here in app.js, I could also define a new object. Let's call it const empty object is this. This also is an object. It doesn't have any data, but it's a perfectly legit object so far as JavaScript is concerned. So I can always do console.log empty object, save it. And if I could show, and if you see it here, you see that's the value. It's an empty object with nothing in it. It has a proto object, which is called a prototype, right? So let's come back to our object. The second thing it would do, it says, okay, hey, assign this keyword. So what does that mean? It means that, for example, in this line, right, it says, hey, JavaScript, whenever this piece of code executes, new places Belgium 1.74, you return an object, which is Belgium, and set this Belgium as this keyword in this function. So that's something called an execution context. Again, it's a bit of a detail we will see in further series, but just remember a new keyword assigns this keyword to your variable. Okay, the third thing it does is to set the prototype of an object. To give you a glimpse, if I could share with you, you see we have an empty object, but it has something called a proto, right? And that is a prototype which is set by JavaScript. That's JavaScript's way of implementing inheritance. And lastly, the answer to the quiz, why this function is not returning a value and still I can access it, is because the new keyword automatically returns this object. So it's similar to saying return this. Now, you could write it in constructor functions, but it's not mandatory. It's implicitly done by JavaScript for us. Cool. So that's about constructor functions. Again, new keyword very important, and the way we define the objects very important. So that's my constructor functions. I hope you liked this video and it demystified the constructor functions and object literals for you. In the next session, we will be talking in detail about object.create and classes, and the most important of them, prototype in JavaScript. And if you like the video, please hit subscribe and like. It will motivate me to create more such videos. Otherwise, lazy as I am, I'll be sitting in my couch and eat chips. I see you in my next series. Bye bye.